mission got a hit. Jesus Christ, that's
Bucky
Bourne.
That's right, it's time to talk about the most degenerate deck currently in Disney Lorcana. This is Emerald Steel Discard, and this version I'm bringing you today is pretty similar to the version that won Chicago this past weekend. I'll put a link in the description below, but here's the official list that won Chicago. This was run by Brian Cortade, I believe his name is pronounced, also known as the Rat on Pixelborn if you've seen him. The list I'm showing you is very, very similar. The big thing I changed is I really do like the Pegasus, so I'm running the Pegasus. He's not, there's like one or two minor changes too. I think I'm on one less sudden chill than he is, but overall it's the same kind of list. And why are they so similar? Because these lists all revolve around this obnoxious little squirrel. This squirrel wants you to play a bunch of Floodborne characters so that as you do, you are discarding your opponent's hand. And that alone will let you win the game, because if your opponent is in top deck mode and they don't have a hand, they can't really play the game, especially in a resource game like this where your hand is also your resource. You have to use your hand to ink cards. Well, if you don't have any cards to ink, you can't get to your higher level stuff. So any list you're playing around Bucky is going to want to be supported by a bunch of Floodborne characters, and this is what you are looking for in your opening hand. I strongly suggest you hard mulligan for Bucky. If you open 7 cards and Bucky is not among them, you are very inclined to pitch all 7 to search for Bucky. Maybe you keep a 1-drop, like if you have a single 1-drop, maybe keep that as well, just in case, but then pitch the other 6 for Bucky, because even though there are strong cards in here like Diablo, like Aladdin, Ursula, etc., the entire point of the deck is to capitalize on the advantage that the discard gets you. And if you don't see Bucky, your game plan is not working. So absolutely hard mulligan for Bucky. Now, how do we support him? So the biggest new toy is Diablo Devoted Herald. This card is absolutely cracked. It is a Floodborne, so if played on turn 3 naturally, it will trigger Bucky. But if you don't know about the super play, what you do is you play his lower form, turn 1, Diablo Maleficent Spy, which also lets you scout your opponent's entire hand, so you absolutely know if they have a Baboom, Storm Rage on, Brawl, something that can deal with your Diablo. Turn 2, you use your 2 ink to play Bucky. However, this Devoted Herald can be shifted without actually paying ink. You just have to discard an action card. So on turn 2, as long as you have the baby Diablo, you can play the Bucky with your 2 ink. You're out of ink, but now you can still shift him by discarding any one of these action cards. We have 12 songs plus 1 action, so it's 13. It's very common to see one of these in your opening hand. This will immediately trigger a discard from Bucky, and then you can use the Diablo to sing another song if you wanted to, immediately quest, which means on their turn, he will immediately draw you a card. Yes, he draws anytime they draw, including their draw for turn, which is really kind of dumb in my opinion. So even if you know they have a Baboom or something that'll immediately kill it, I think it is worth it if you get both a discard and a card draw out of it. That's 100% worth it to me. And now they've spent their entire turn just having to answer the Diablo. What other Floodborns are we using? We are using Aladdin Brave Rescuer. Technically, we're running 2 locations, so you can shift this, but you actually can't because we don't run any baby Aladdin, so don't even worry about that. But he's just a Floodborne, and he's so good against Steel and Sapphire decks because those decks are so item-heavy right now, and just by questing, he's starting to get rid of those items. And if they don't have items, they can't draw off a Flaversham card is way better than I originally gave it credit for. Flynn Rider is kind of the unsung hero in this deck. This is your payoff for all the discard, that if you Bucky turn 2, let's say you shift the Diablo, then you Aladdin turn 3, then you Flynn turn 4, you rip 3 cards out of their hand, which means he's going to be questing for an insane amount of lore, and he's evasive, and if they're having to save the removal for the Diablo, then they can't really answer the Flynn. So this is your massive, massive payoff. Original versions of this list, I didn't run this card, and I sorely missed him, so I would highly recommend putting him in here. Jafar Dreadnought, if you absolutely need to challenge, usually you don't, but sometimes you'll run into an aggro deck or a deck that goes faster than you. Not only is he a decent challenger with 3 strength, he lets you draw a card when he banishes, which is really, really nice. And again, he's a Floodborne, so he triggers Bucky. Also Pegasus, this is a great Floodborne that triggers Bucky. If at its best, you combine it with the baby Pegasus, you can actually go Pegasus 1, Bucky 2, Big Pegasus 3. You shift, you trigger Bucky. Now Bucky's evasive as well, so Bucky should be pretty safe to quest that turn. And then this is just an evasive 2-lore quester. So yeah, it can be answered with a Smash or a Madame Medusa, but they can't challenge it very easily. So That's huge. And then our other big 5-drops, Beast Tragic Hero. Not only is it taking cards away from them, if Bucky's on the field, you are drawing more cards as he stays on the field. Robin Hood, naturally a really good one too, and can be shifted onto the small Robin Hood. So again, you can go Robin Hood 1, Bucky 2, big Robin Hood 3, make him discard. He can immediately sing, challenge, quest, whatever. He is a great tool to deal with aggro because while he's challenging and removing their board, he's also pushing you towards your goal of higher lore, which is fantastic. One morph, just as another target you can shift, you can kind of surprise them. You can use this morph. I guess that's the one way you can get the Aladdin out is this morph. So, but you can shift any of these Floodborns on there. And we have opted for the Ursula package. Now, you always want to run this one because songs are so prevalent, and it's just a solid, generically good card, and it kind of is another form of discard, even if it's not a guarantee like Bucky if they don't have a song. I do like this Ursula a lot too, though, because right now people are having to save a lot of their removal for Diablo. Well, they can't really answer both, or usually, unless they just happen to have everything. And this Ursula is a beast to deal with while singing. Now, there's nothing as generically neutral as Friends on the Other Side as she is in the purple decks, but still, singing a Sudden Chill, that now you're getting a double discard. Storm Rage On is one of the best songs she can sing, as it's 4 damage, which usually is going to kill anything on turn 3-4, and then it's going to draw you 2 cards. That's fantastic. And then also Strength of a Raging Fire, where suddenly, well, I don't need 6 characters to one-shot something for 6 damage. If Ursula sings it twice at 3 damage, that's very, very good. You can cut this if you want. I'm not 100% sure what I would replace it with. Just maybe try to fit in a few more Floodborns. Tinkerbell. I did have Tinkerbell originally. It's very good in the mirror match, but sometimes you don't always get to 6 ink, so I feel like I'd have to cut the whole Ursula package to fit Tinkerbell in. Same with Grab Your Sword. I've seen a lot of lists run Grab Your Sword because, again, it's very good into the mirrors. It's one of the few earliest ways you can guarantee deal with a Bucky on the field. And I thought about it, and I don't think you're wrong for putting it in, but another thing I liked about this list was the low on inkable count. It made it pretty consistent from that point of view, so I am opting not to run it. You can absolutely put it in, especially if you plan to engage the mirror a lot. Finally, our songs. 1 Baboom, just to deal with opposing Diablos, or, again, some other threat that really needs to die that has 2 health. Sudden Chill's more discard, and talked about these are your removal spells. Bruno is very, very good, especially once their hand is empty. It essentially just acts like a Dragon Fire, which is weird. Obviously, they have to have an empty hand, but that's what you're going for anyway with Bucky. Yeah, now instead of just bouncing a card, which used to be Green's thing, now it also makes them discard it, and if it's the only card in their hand, it will be guaranteed discard it, so it kind of turns into an inkable Dragon Fire, which is very crazy. Zeus is really good against locations. It's kind of one of our only location ways we can deal with that very easily. There are times I've wanted more Zeus because locations are so insane, but Hidden Cove is also a really, really good tech piece. It might seem expensive, like if you're going, whatever, Pegasus turn 1, Bucky turn 2, Shift Pegasus, you don't really have the ink to get this out of here. But especially if you are anticipating you're going against Steel, you think, okay, big Tinkerbell's coming down. Moving a Bucky to the Hidden Cove so he doesn't die to the Tinkerbell ping is huge. Having this Jafar attack something for 4 all of a sudden over 3 is huge. So Cove actually does pull its weight quite a bit. You know the drill. You know what you're trying to do. You love it, you hate it. It's just a terribly, terribly obnoxious, very strong deck. Let's see how it performs. Game 1 is against Amber and Ruby. Look at what we have. We have a bunch of 1-drops, no Bucky. So I keep a single Robin Hood just in case I can shift, and we dig for Bucky. Did we get him? No. And this is going to happen, especially if you're me. I seem to have very poor luck at actually getting to the Bucky, whereas I've seen others who just seem to be able to consistently draw it no matter what. No good turn 2 play, but this is why I like the Pegasus, is that the early evasive, there's just not a whole lot in the game that can deal with this. So here we go. Can do Pegasus. I could shift a big Pegasus. At this point, I want to put the draw threat of Diablo, plus the 2 strength cancels out the opposing Flynn Rider. Guess what? They brawl it immediately. And they're going to do that. People are going to remove this card, but it means they're using removal on it. So we keep questing with the Pegasus, which is keeping us even on lore. Say, hey, do you have a second brawl? Yes, he does have a second brawl. But here's the thing about this brawl. It might feel bad because you're losing your Diablo, but they are using their entire turn for that. So I opt to put down Bucky. I just go ahead and take out the Flynn, otherwise he would have gotten his extra lore. Now we are set up for the Beast to come down next turn. Now this is way later than you would want. I have not made this person discard a single card. And that's not what you want to be doing with a Bucky. Now I'm going to be able to start hitting their hand. However, while I wasn't making them discard, in a way, I was quote-unquote wasting their turns by them having to answer both of those Diablos. Again, when they're on this early ink and they're spending their entire turn using a Brawl, they're not progressing towards whatever game plan they went. That Gaston, I'm sure, wanted to come out way, way sooner, but they couldn't afford it because they had to sit there and answer my Diablo. Now, I've got them in top deck mode. Now, we're in top deck mode too, but luckily, we have the Beast. So unless they can answer that, we take that last card out of their hand. We're going to be the ones drawing. And here's another reason, like I said earlier, I like the Pegasus. Look, Maui comes down. What can Maui hit? He can't hit anything. And we draw the Cove, which is beautiful with the Jafar Snake here. We can move the Snake here. Now he can take out Gaston, which is really nice. Sure, he can counter hit with the Maui, but that's it. I go ahead and drop out the Morph too, just saying, hey, you have no idea what could come out of this. And those baby Pegasus have allowed me to keep up in lore. Otherwise, I would have to make up this huge gap differential. And our opponent, while they've got some good attackers on board, Maui can just take out the Hidden Cove. They're still just top deck. Yeah, they have to top deck a Teeth and Ambitions, and they're sitting there, well, who do I get rid of, the Morph or the Beast? They choose the Beast because they're so scared of what's going to come down off the Morph. Now, at this point, if you want to, you can feel free to quest with your Buckies a bit, because at this point, they're top decking. You have to be very mindful about when you want to do that, because you don't want them to potentially redraw into the game. By the way, the reason I attacked with the baby Pegasus last turn is because I know this is a Rapunzel heal deck. Yeah, I just quest with Bucky at this point, and I don't want them to top deck a Rapunzel, heal up their character, and suddenly they draw way more cards. Our opponent can't develop a strategy at this point, because all they can do is draw the card and then play the card they drew for turn. That's it. Next, we are going against Ruby Sapphire, which is the premier late game deck. No Bucky, hard mulligan for it. Hey, there he is. Unfortunately, we don't have a guarantee shift for any of these cards, so here's kind of a weird reverse situation, right? We have the Bucky, but we don't have the Floodborns. It's really nice if you see Bucky in your first hand, because then you can keep him and then you can just dig mulligan for only the Floodborns to support him. But when you don't see Bucky, it doesn't matter if you have 3 Floodborns if you don't have Bucky. They're not doing as much. So, unfortunately, this is kind of what we had to do. I opted to just put out the Robin Hood, go a-questing, and we've got the Bucky out. And this is blue-red, so we know our opponent's just going to take their time ramping up. There's a Popsicle. That's good for them. Scuttle potentially gets them even more items, which it is a Fishbone Quill. Now, luckily, we draw into a Shift Robin Hood here, which is very, very nice. I almost consider putting the Ursula out because we do have 2 Strength of a Raging Fire, but for the most part, I want to go faster than this deck. I'm not looking to answer its forwards. And so what I do is I actually get 2 discards. I shift the Robin Hood. That'll trigger a Bucky. Then I just go ahead and sing Bruno. Yeah, it's only Scuttle. Scuttle's not exactly like a primary target I have to get rid of, but it does at least hit their hand one more time, which is nice. And I even considered questing with Bucky there, but I remembered I'm against red. They're on 5 ink. I was like, I don't want them to come down with Maui. They could already come down with Maui and take out Robin Hood. Opponent's going to play Fishbone, dig even deeper with Scuttle. Doesn't hit anything that time, which is one of the reasons that card is very frustrating. So at this point, I just go ahead and quest with the Robin Hood. I could put out the Ursula, but I'm thinking the odds that they have a song are very low. Turns out I think they actually did have the song. They had the How Far I'll Go, so I probably should have played Ursula, but oh well. Trying to keep my hand moderately healthy. So we're going to trigger Bucky, take the last card out of their hand, and now they're in top deck mode, and they had to be prepared, but it doesn't matter. You can't play it if it's in the discard zone. So at this point, they have to just play what they draw or try to save up and hope I don't have continued ways to keep pressuring their hand. And they're just hoping to draw into a Flaversham. Tala's decent. Tala lets them scale a little more. But yeah, so at this point, I just go ahead and hard cast the discard, get rid of that. I could have done Bruno as well to get one thing off the board, but again, I don't really care if these stay on the board too much. And yeah, our opponent just had, whatever that was, they just had to ink it for turn. Now I do use the Bruno on the Tala. It's probably more prudent to save the Bruno for something like a Tamatoa or a Dragon or just a Flaversham, some card that is going to get them really repeated value. Speaking of which, yep, they dropped Tamatoa. So here's where I really would have wanted to use the Bruno, although obviously, yeah, and they put the card out of their hand too. So lesson learned, but nonetheless, we're on 17 ink, or 17 lore. So at this point, unless they top deck Be Prepared, we're in a pretty good situation. They can dig with Tamatoa, which is a little scary, but we put them on such lethal. They go digging with Tamatoa. They have to redraw the Popsicle. And yeah, they have to use the Be Prepared. So not great for us as we do finally lose our whole board, including the Bucky, but they also lose, they lose their Tamatoa, their engine piece. Unfortunately, they do draw into Flaversham. That's going to let them keep refilling their hand. This matchup can be difficult and easy at the same time. I really feel like this one's kind of a toss-up. It just depends who sees what. If they see the Flaversham early with a lot of items and you can't get Aladdin to break the items, the Flaversham will outpace your discard unless you see a bunch of Buckies. But a single Bucky is not going to keep up with the draw speed of a Flaversham. However, if you can get something early out like Aladdin, if they don't see the Flavershams and you can get them to an empty hand before they've ramped up to, what do they have now, 9-14 ink? Yeah, now you can make a huge difference. Go ahead and put out Bucky. And at this point, with the ward, they basically have to be prepared. Or Sisu, that works too. Pretty good top deck answer. But we're showing them, hey, you have to answer everything. Look at this. They Flaversham, they Popsicle into Tala, into Sisu removal. Oh my goodness. I was like, are you kidding me? Come on, quit answering every single thing I put out. All right, here's Pegasus. Can you answer this? No, they can't. Forced to answer every single card at that point, and eventually, hopefully, they're going to run out. Another no Bucky start. I mulligan a hard 7 digging for it. Are we going to get it? Nope. As you can see, for whatever reason, I'm not very good at drawing Bucky early. Nice thing is we do have Diablo. I checked the hand. They do have Baboom, so I could shift Diablo next turn. It will die immediately, but as long as it's getting some value, it's discarding or drawing, I'm okay with that. And I do opt to go into this. You could argue this isn't the right play because, again, they have Baboom. I do draw into the Bucky there, but they use the Baboom. It's like, okay, I did at least draw a card off of him. I wouldn't feel as good about it if I just played him for 3, no Bucky, and then he immediately dies. So I go ahead and put out the Ursula. Storm Rage on is primed and ready. I could just take out Smee here. I opt to put 1 on each because Smee 2, if he attacks now, he'll kill himself. I could even hard cast the Storm Rage on to get rid of it, but I really want to get Bucky out because now I can Bucky Pegasus Beast next turn. Ursula's good. She's a good supplemental plan, but she is not the main thing you want to be doing. You need that Bucky. Opponent takes out Ursula with Smee, inks a friends, and puts a castle. Now, this card is a big problem for us. Not only can it help refill their hand, and it gains them passive lore, we just don't have great attackers in this deck. So other than our Along Came Zeus, it's very difficult to deal with a castle. It can be a big pain in the butt. Speaking of Along Came Zeus, they get rid of our card draw. So the good news, we've put them on nothing in hand. The bad news is, yeah, we're kind of in trouble. At this point, I feel okay attacking with Bucky because I know if they top deck to Madam Mim, Fox, they can't use it because there's no forward to bounce. But we are going to put the pressure on that castle, but it's gotten them, 6 lore now? Another Along Came Zeus. So Robin Hood is going to have to take that out. Here comes another Pegasus. I'm not making him discard anything, so you could argue I could just give up the Bucky at this point because they're being forced to play out everything they draw. But part of the reason they're being forced to play out everything they draw is because Bucky is still sitting there. If the Bucky goes away, now they might be tempted to just sit there and hold on to their hand. Is this going to be a Tinkerbell? Yep. So goodbye, Bucky. You did your job, sir. You got them to nothing. Now we bring out Diablo and Aladdin. I go ahead and take out the Smee. That way I get the lore and the card draw, and we've caught up. We're up to 9. We made up the difference of that castle. Be very mindful when you're facing a Tinkerbell. Do not give her the ability to do her on-challenge effect. So I'm only questing with my evasive so that the Tinkerbell cannot challenge and do something about that. So opponent realizes this and just says, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to race you. And I check, oh, shoot, they're on 5 lore. Now I'm the one who has to challenge. But there are some favorable trades I can make here. As long as I take off even a single lore, unless they top deck a goat, I'm in a pretty decent situation. Which I opt to hit the rabbit just in case they were to top deck the goat. I mean, they could still draw goat, snake, and win, but at that point, it's like, well, I've kind of done as much as I can. If they've got it, they've got it. Opponent took out as many cards as they could by challenging, but it just wasn't enough. They bounced back the Tinkerbell, and at this point, I'm just going to overload them with bodies. I know the Tinkerbell can do one shot, but that's our opponent's entire inkwell, and just say, okay, yeah, if you literally have to get through every single forward on this board character, as well as a 6-drop Robin Hood. Don't think that's going to happen. Opponent quests for what they can and drops Tinkerbell, but that's not enough, so we just go ahead and take the victory. I go ahead and let Robin Hood get it with his lore steal. Next, we are on to green-purple, a deck that can go very quickly and can challenge pretty well with cards like Fox and Snake. Now look, I have the opening. Not only do I have Bucky, I have the Diablo shift and the action cards. Holy moly. Finally, I can show you the secret sauce. Finally, Rudros has come back to Pixelborn. Give a little scout with Diablo. Knowing it's green-purple, there's not really anything I have to worry about in this matchup. Steel is, of course, your biggest enemy. He can drop the Ursula, which is why I kept 2 action/songs, because if this Ursula steals one, now you can just use the other one. So he steals Strength of a Raging Fire. So here's what you do. Make sure you always put out the Bucky first. You need the Bucky on the field to trigger the Diablo. I've seen some people do the reverse order. It does not work. So we do that. We shift. Boom. Here comes Diablo. Gets an immediate discard. I just go ahead and take out this Pegasus because I realize he potentially could shift into the big Pegasus on the next turn and then kill the Diablo. So I opt to attack instead of questing. Crab's strong, but can't do anything. Now we drop Aladdin, discard again. They're already down to 1 card in hand, and Diablo is now drawing a card every time they do something. Ink again. Plays a Tinkerbell, really good top deck there, or if he had it in hand, so it can give the Ursula evasive for the turn to let it take out the Diablo. Oh, what did I top deck? Oh, another Diablo. Granted, there's nothing to do from your hand at this point, but I opt to give I take out the crab just because I kind of learned my lesson from that Tinkerbell last time. I was like, just in case, maybe I should get rid of this crab. I don't want them potentially getting challenge power. But our opponent drops the Queen's Castle. This is a difficult card for us to deal with. Again, we don't have great attackers. I'm probably going to send, the Diablo into it. And remember, the Tinkerbell can kill this Diablo. I opt to quest with, I even send the Bucky into it just because I'm like, you know what, if you want to hit the Bucky, fine. You'll have to trade out with the Ursula if you choose it. I have to get this castle out of there. I got their hand empty. I don't enjoy doing it, but this castle's got to go. Storm Rage on, cuts off the Tinkerbell, cuts off any potential, and we rip the friends out. So the castle's going to put him to 10 lore, which is nothing to sneeze at, but now I can at least beat it up next turn. Mother Knows Best will bounce the Robin Hood, which is just a very temporary measure, and this is the power of them being in top deck mode. They just have to hope they draw into something useful. Well, if they happen to draw into an Ursula, which stole my card, but it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to quest with everything. They have a single 1/3 on board, and they're just hoping. Do draw into a rabbit, so our opponent is getting really good top decks here. Oh, I've got another beast, which means it's pretty safe to quest with this one. Put out the next one. I'm getting the superior card draw at the moment, and my board is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And because this is green-purple, they don't have a board wipe. There's no Be Prepared I have to worry about. Ursula rips another song. This person has some really good draws here, but unfortunately, it's just not going to be enough, especially when, here comes Flynn. What are you going to do? Flynn's going to quest for 4 on his next turn, and I'm already up to 19, so... You saw the power of that early Bucky shift, man. Just absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. And very unfair. Now we have Sapphire Steel. This is supposed to be a deck that counters us. We have 2 Buckies in hand, which is very, very nice and can really put the hurt on this deck, especially because the big power point you have to worry about going against Sapphire Steel is grab your sword. Grab your sword on turn 5. Now, usually they're going to ramp up, so it's probably going to be earlier than 5. And sometimes if they're playing the Robin Hood package, they can shift to that Robin Hood and do it as early as turn 3. If they do that, you're kind of just out of luck. Not a whole lot you can do. So here, they've ramped up. I almost consider the Ursula for a second because I have the Sudden Chill. Here's a nice thing. I know Blue-Gray has no rush, so I feel okay singing the discard with Bucky just to keep hitting their hand. Here comes Belle. I drop Aladdin. Now we're triggering a double discard. Bye, Flaversham. Bye, Along Came Zeus. I ink the beast, not because I want to, but because I do need to keep up on ink. And they desperately need to grab your sword this turn, which I'm assuming if they had it, they would just jam it out. Yeah, a lone Belle here isn't going to do much against this board. They don't. Here comes Flynn with double Bucky. What did you have there? Let's see. Tinkerbell, which they couldn't cast, and Whole New World. And they didn't Whole New World last turn because I assume they just didn't. It doesn't feel good to use that song. They were clearly hoping to sing with the Tinkerbell. Now, they do get to let it go the Flynn, so that vastly slows down our lore, but we have Diablo. We're going to be getting card draw and they still just have a lone bell. I mean, they can't play the game. This is a deck designed to beat us. And look at that. Okay, well, they top deck a bell. That's useless. That they can't do anything with that. Now I can fully quest out. You can't play the game when your hand is just ripped to shreds. You can't ink cards there. They do cast the Whole New World there, which if you notice, Whole New World triggers Diablo 7 times. Be cautious about how much you draw on that. You don't want to mill yourself out. Is that brutal or is that brutal? Card's ridiculous. The combination of the Bucky and all the new Floodborns have just pushed this thing over the top. It feels really bad to play against it, and the Diablo is so insanely strong too. This is a very meta warping card. You have to be playing things, actions, characters, whatever, that answer this. You cannot just let a Diablo sit there and go unanswered. It's brutal. It's unfun. I think it's certainly worthy of a ban, but I think I'll make a more full video on that later. But hey, if you want to make some people miserable and do really well and take top place at a tournament and a Pixelborn tournament and do just really well overall, you can't look much more than this deck. Hope you enjoy or despise whatever your preferred flavor is. And until next time, take care.